Hi, this is Bits and Pieces, the official podcast of Component Supply. I'm Kristin, and today I'm so excited because we're going to be talking about a lot of medical device development processes. We're going to be talking about how an idea comes from a sketch to a prototype, just from an engineer that has an idea or a physician that has an idea. But we know between the first idea and the first real prototype, and certainly before the clinical use, there's this huge development process that really can either make or break a startup or an idea. So today we have the privilege of having Hazim Amir from ZenCath, founder and CEO of ZenCath, with us today. And he is going to be talking to us about applying lean principles to medical device R&D with a special focus on endoscopes and minimally invasive devices. So welcome, Hazim. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. It's an honor.
It's such an honor. We've talked a few times. I have limited knowledge on the robotics space, so I'm learning a lot as we dive into all things ZenCath and what you have to offer. But even prior to recently founding this company, you were very involved in the medical device community in the R&D space. So I'd love to talk about what drew you to the medical device space in the first place.
Yeah, I was drawn to the medical device because of the impact that we make to patients' life and to the quality of life of others. So it's super rewarding to me.
It definitely is. You got involved particularly in the robotics piece. What interested you about that?
I was particularly interested in robotics because I'm passionate about taking something complex and make it more user-friendly, scalable, and more importantly, makes it achieve excellent clinical outcomes.
Yeah, it's so true. There are some very complex ideas out there that can benefit from efficiencies and some simplicity, and I love that idea. You went from working for larger organizations to now really having a startup and doing great. How has that transition affected the way you look at medical device development?
As an engineer, I was typically focusing on one phase of R&D, and the transition now as a founder, I actually get to help customers throughout multiple phases of R&D and think ahead for my customers, so make their experience seamless and efficient.
Yeah, it's a feedback that we've gotten before from R&D engineers that occasionally they do feel a little pigeonholed in larger organizations. They're interested in the whole piece of the puzzle, and sometimes their focus is just on one. So it's exciting when occasionally they start something of their own and get to put the knowledge that they've acquired at all the different places into the whole picture. So congratulations for venturing out and doing something different. It's exciting.
It is, yeah, appreciate it.
So now you have ZenCath, you have teams coming to you early. Is there a typical customer journey, a team that comes to you early in the program or one who's deep in development? Is there a combination or one that you see most frequently?
We see more early startups, particularly if they don't have designer in-house, they don't have the infrastructure to prototype or test. Those customers tend to leverage a lot of our services from design to prototype to testing. But we also see mid to large-sized companies that come in and want to study one aspect of their product at a higher resolution. So we see kind of a mix of both smaller companies and large ones.
Yeah. So you typically, I think, you're introduced to the customer when they have faced a problem of some kind. And can you describe maybe what some of those startup teams or some of the engineers that you're working with, what are some of the problems they're trying to solve when they come to see you?
We see three main problems that customers come to us with. First one and the biggest is technical challenges. So anything in the complex, low quantity, often get no quote turned on from similar suppliers. So we get excited about those. We also get problems on the technical side that they've tried many things and they're in the same place as 2 or 3 months ago. There's not much of progress. Yeah. So they want a fresh eyes on it. They want to dive deeper into the technical challenges. Other challenges is lead time and budget. So customers often come to us, say, hey, I got 10 weeks, 12 weeks lead time from similar suppliers. Can you get me something in 2 weeks? And we do have the supply chain and the capability to respond to some of these, even sometimes shorter than the 2 weeks, to some extent. Tight budget is also common, particularly for like pre-seed or a smaller startup, and they just want to get to that functional prototype, so they get the next round of funding, and we work with those on a tight budget to get them there without spending a lot of money.
Yeah, so it's the budget, the time crunch and the budget crunch. You're trying to bridge the gap there, and you almost become a sourcing agent because it's not just what you're doing in-house, it's finding the materials to work with. So you're having to build that network with all the different components and things you're using so that you're prepared for them. So it's a lot of work for you really to work with it, but it's got to be so rewarding because you get to see all sorts of new ideas come to life.
Yeah, absolutely. And then that's what we enjoy the most. That's what I'm passionate about, is to, go behind the scene and see how you can connect the dots, how you can connect certain supply chain, how to be strategic for your customers without sitting down and do a strategy meeting, but like really see what the customer heading and prepare for their journey ahead of time.
Yeah. That's great. Everything is about making everything more efficient and more timely, meeting the needs of the customers. And so one of the things that was so interesting, the last time we talked, you were talking about taking some of those manufacturing lean principles and putting them into R&D, which is something we don't hear as much, at least not formally talking about lean. So applying it to R&D is a different kind of challenge. I'd love for you to walk us through what it actually looks like in an innovation process. It's not a factory floor, it's not full-scale production. You're applying these principles in a development program. So what does that look like for you?
Yeah, lean is often heard in the manufacturing floor, as you mentioned. And there's many principles developed for the production side of lean, a lot of which is ways to minimize waste. The lean R&D is not very well developed nor practiced. There are some principle out there along the side of prototype quickly, learn quickly, so you can advance development. But there's still a lot more to develop, to practice, to add on to it. The lean R&D principles and the vision for ZenCath is to actually develop some of these principles within R&D and practice those principles and find out what works, what doesn't, so we can advance development more effectively and at a efficient cost, essentially.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept because creating efficiency in production is different from creating efficiency in development, because development is really about speed, but not just producing faster, it's learning faster. You hear fail well or fail fast, and there's truth to that, but it has to be meaningful failure so that you don't repeat your same mistakes, that you can take some of those principles with you. And the earlier that you can figure out what doesn't work in some cases, the quicker you can move into your next phase. So I love that idea, and I'm excited to see how it plays out for you and what tips you're going to be giving as you kind of develop that concept and apply it to R&D. I think that's wonderful and a different thought for me to carry on.
Appreciate it.
So you have a framework with development. You're going to design, you're going to prototype, you're going to test, and probably you're going to repeat, and that cycle just goes on and on. So it sounds simple. We're certainly oversimplifying that process. There are a lot of other, sub-steps that take place. But even within those steps, it's not an efficient process. It's not you're here for a couple weeks and you're here for a couple weeks and you're here and then you repeat. There are places in the development cycle where people get stuck. Can you talk about where you see teams typically getting stuck and what some of those challenges are?
Yeah, I would boil it down to two things, inefficiency and discontinuity. Inefficiency, what I mean by that is companies typically have designers in-house. Often They have even testing in-house. A few have all testing, design, prototyping. This cycle currently, it takes about 10 weeks because of they have to outsource the prototype or the testing. And that cycle of 10 weeks plus is inefficient.
Yeah.
The discontinuity of it, which is a larger bucket, is the fact that early in the testing phase, you realize that this design is not close to what you had, seen it in CAD or in your analysis, and the variation of that design is still not close. And that realization doesn't happen in the current cycle quickly enough. You prototype outside of your company. You get it. You get the prototypes. You test them out, and then you have to do another order to get the next idea out. Mm-hmm. Versus if you have the same team doing design, prototyping, and testing, mm-hmm. early in the testing, if you see data that give you a different direction, you can pivot quickly. Yes. You can get to the next design they had in mind and compress potentially 2-3 iteration cycle into that one iteration cycle.
Yeah, it's so true. Having to wait is the biggest burden. I know that's why, component supply tries to have the quickest turnarounds for things like tapered mandrels and really just the off-the-shelf components, because we see that all the time. I mean, I can't tell you how many times someone is like, what's the expedite? Like, we'll pay anything. We don't like, what's the expedite? We just need it tomorrow. Otherwise, we're just at a standstill and waiting for something. So it's absolutely right. If you can't do it in-house, you've got to find people that support that. But oftentimes, if you can bring it to someone who has more than just one piece of the puzzle, that's really where the inefficiency and the discontinuity can be resolved very quickly. So we love that you're doing that. We talked about incorporating the lean principles. Do you have certain metrics that you use to kind of measure improvement or measure success in creating an efficiency?
Yeah, the lean model, if I would simplify it to one statement, is shorten the time between the design to data, mm-hmm. and the prototyping sitting right in the middle of that. So if you can compress the 2 or 3 iteration cycle into one, that is a huge time saving overall in the overall development cycle. So let's take an example: a small startup, burn rate of $1 million a month. Oof. And they spend 4 to 5 years to develop a product. If they use lean principles and speed up, let's say they save 6 to 12 months at the end, that's $6 to $12 million of saving if they apply the lean principle. So that's the idea behind it. Aside from the cost saving, the lean principle also promote the data-driven approach, the DFM approach, mm-hmm. Because you have it like all in one team very quickly. It's heavily rely on data. So it lead into more optimized product, more scalable. So it's got a lot of benefits to it.
Yeah, it's really good. I think it would help you identify some of the root causes of the issues much earlier than, like you said, waiting until it's in production and then realizing it's not scalable because of a tolerance stack up or just too tight of tolerances in general. So you get into a revision cycle, potentially. That's what you're trying to apply these principles to get them out of this vicious, endless cycle. When they're in it, what do you see as the root cause?
Yeah, the endless revision cycle, it's often seen toward the end. Mm. And if you work in the medical device long enough, you've seen the last 20% of the product development sometimes takes as much as the first 80%. I think there's probably a few root cause. It's not clear to me if there's one particular root cause, but I do see like DFM or scalability surface, toward the end of the project, and that often kick back development to different revisions, different ways of designing, And at that point is a bit too late to do major design changes. So we're trying to avoid that.
Yeah, we talk about it's a better question to ask, what can work, what can work, what's the right option versus later having to say, how can I make this work because this is what we've chosen, this is what we've locked, this is how much money we've put into this, we're kind of stuck, what are the minor changes we can make to make it work with what we've got, versus early on really seeing those design flaws. And we tell our customers sometimes when we get something that's really intricate, or maybe they've called out non-critical specs as critical, and we tell them, you're asking for a prototype of 5. We can make that work, but we do want you to be aware these are some of the specs in your drawing that when you take this to scale, maybe it works for 5, maybe it works for 50, 500, but when you're starting to produce thousands of these parts, it's going to become just very expensive, not just because of the manufacturing piece, that's important too, but of the time of, validation and ensuring that all, like the measuring process is so intense at that point with all of the different design elements. So it's such a good point. I often, because I spend most of the time in the prototype world, I sometimes forget that things can get stuck a lot later. And sometimes it's months and months and months before we hear back that there was a design change. So already by that point, if I see a drawing that I saw 12 months ago and it surfaces across my desk as a revision, a year later, I'm like, that definitely wasn't as fast as they wanted it to be. And we're just one piece of the puzzle. So it could have been a different design change within the scope of the device that said, because we made these changes, now we have to go back and change this one that component supply was working on to make it all work together. But it is a little discouraging. I sometimes am like, what did we do wrong that we never heard back from these guys? And then sure enough, at some point, much later than I think they hoped, we get to work with them again, and hopefully at least our part we get to make more efficient. But I know that can be discouraging to see your project have to go back to the drawing board because of a failure.
Yeah, thanks for providing that feedback to the customer. I'm on the same page. I provide advice on anything that comes, across my desk. Hey, do you like some recommendations, some free advice on this?
Yeah.
I would approach it this way instead of this way.
Yeah.
That way you set your customer on the right path. Yeah,
we don't want to see that same drawing in a year. We want it to have moved into bigger quantities or something by that point. Some meaningful change versus just something we didn't catch something early. So that's good. So we talk about some bottlenecks in R&D, in the product development. You've got the kind of the over-engineering that we talk about a lot. Just, I think that's kind of what you're saying. It gets stuck in that last 80% because you find something was over-engineered to the point that it doesn't scale. So you have that piece of the puzzle. There's also a supplier disconnection. And I think you've already kind of addressed that you're a help to that piece of the puzzle. People can't find the right supplier for the component that they're working on, and you provide that help. So I always like to talk about, in your mind, in the ideal scenario, when would an R&D engineer start having the conversations with their supply chain?
I would say supply chain is part of DFM, and DFM in general need to be involved as early as possible, somewhere around the timeline when the designer know what path are they taking, and it doesn't have to be heavily, structured. Get some early DFM feedback from your team, from your suppliers, and just check in on a regular basis as direction kind of changes. So that way they're on the same page.
Yeah, I think one of the kind of basic supplier questions to ask is this the material that I spec'd out? Is this a long lead material, or is this something that's commercially available easily? I think those are things to balance, because if you're having to, every time you're making a change or something, you have to wait a long lead time, that can slow you down. So you can consider it, and even if it's a material that's critical, at least you can buy more of it up front to prepare for those longer lead times. I think sometimes customers aren't having that conversation. So I'll often see a design and then say, hey, this is a custom order of a hypo tube, for example. This is what's off the shelf available. And they're like, oh yeah, that'll work. But if we didn't ask the question and just quoted the custom, every time they have an iteration, it would take so long just to get the not meaningless component, but just the one that's not critical to the rest of the device. You're waiting on that. We don't want to be the reason that you're hung up on something as basic as a hypo tube, right? It's so important to have those conversations as early as you can. They don't have to be complex. They're usually like a 5-minute conversation. I think just pick up the phone or send the email and call it a day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so the other disconnect would be a clinical disconnect. So this is more what's going on your end. You've got all the components you need. You have a concept. Physicians know what they need clinically, right? But the engineers know what's actually buildable, and hopefully they're having the DFM conversation, what's scalable. And bridging that gap sometimes is harder than it sounds, right, to get the physicians involved. So how do we do that? How do we bridge that gap between the clinical need and the build?
Yeah, getting feedback early from physician or the clinical engineering team internally within the company, preferably before designing. It's highly encouraged. This also makes them part of the journey, so they get more engaged, and as they become more engaged, they provide more detail and better insights into what they're looking for.
That's really good feedback, just the involvement, kind of getting more buy-in from them because you've asked for their opinion. That's a really good point, having like that personal aspect to it.
Yeah.
That's good. Do you, in your work, are you working regularly with physicians or more on the engineering side, or are you actively bridging that gap?
I work typically with both, actually. Often, some of the startup founders are either on the engineering side, or sometimes they're split. They're physician/engineers or /nurse. Mm-hmm. So I work with both, and when they come to us, we're trying to bridge the gap in between the knowledge and explain things in a way that like a physician would understand. So. If it's just an engineering team, we can dive deeper into the details. Mm-hmm. If it's cross-functional, we try to keep the message in a way that fits the audience.
Yeah, no, that's good. You have to adjust the lingo a little bit depending on who you're working with, who your audience is. That's exactly it. All right, so we talked a little bit about burn rate and how much money these startups are spending, and we want to talk a little bit about component supply is an advocate of off the shelf, right? That's our model. We want you to test off the shelf and then do slight modifications where possible before running to a full custom material, particularly at the R&D phase. But then we've seen those scale too. You didn't need this component you didn't need custom. Determine what's essential and critical and focus the custom on that piece and use standard where you can. And it does seem to fit a little bit with the lean R&D using the off-the-shelf stuff. Do you agree? Do you have any insights into that?
Off-the-shelf fits directly into the lean model. I believe learning from 5 different iterations with off-the-shelf and not the perfect component, it could be a lot more learning than doing one custom build and wait like 12 lead times. So yeah, off-the-shelf, it's hugely encouraged when it's appropriate.
Yeah, I like that idea, like learning from 5 different iterations versus waiting to just determine if one thing works. You get a little bit more experience there. And that's part Absolutely. Of R&D, right? Is just learning from a lot of different angles. And the more you have to test with, the more components you have access to, the more you get to test and learn to carry with you, not just to that project, but to future projects. Because especially for engineers like yourself who are working, you're seeing something different every day. And I'm sure there is, something that you've learned from a project that you've applied to something a little different. You get all the exposure.
Yeah, absolutely. And fun fact, sometimes you use off-the-shelf component and you think they're not the perfect fit for this build, but you'll be surprised sometimes where they outperform what you thought a custom component would do. So yeah, you will never know.
Well, we see it too, where it's like, oh, well, we want a thinner wall, but then you have to deal with kinking and structural integrity, particularly with the tubes, right? And so sometimes, a standard, extra thin wall tube will do what you needed it to do. You didn't have to go as thin as, you thought. It works off the shelf. So that's exactly it. I love that.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so there's a difference. We want to accelerate learning, but we don't want to accelerate too many mistakes. You're going to make some mistakes along the way. That's just the given in the R&D space. And thank goodness, right? We want to make mistakes in R&D so we're not making them in the patient later. So hopefully there's a healthy failure point, but we don't want to move recklessly in R&D. So how can teams accelerate the learning without really amplifying mistakes or carrying mistakes forward?
Speeding up only makes sense if you have control of what you're building and how you build in them and how you test your devices. Otherwise, moving fast without a plan, it could be more chaotic than going slow and in control. So I would say work on something that you have full control over it, and then speed up from there. Otherwise, it won't make sense to speed up without a plan.
Yeah, no, it's a good thought. One of the things we encourage in the full scale, because again, we might work with a handful of components in a device, but if everything is custom, it's really hard to find the failure point. So like you say, work with the knowns first, with what will work in the prototype, and then gradually add complexity or gradually start testing the things that you're unsure about. If you're unsure about everything, it's hard to narrow down a problem. And it's just practical because I feel like R&D engineers are just so smart, and they can put everything in that program and it looks so good on paper. And then, man, it just makes you mad when you get it on your benchtop and things start breaking and kinking and not working out. So, you do have to slow down, start with the knowns. That's such a good point, and then build on top of that. Where do you think customers waste the most time or even money during their product development?
Not making decisions quickly can cost companies a lot of time and money. So making that decision quick and learning from that decision, it's often better than just delaying a decision to come up with that perfect decision for the device. So I would say just make a decision, learn from it, and then move on.
My dad, when he was a young man, he worked for a furniture warehouse essentially, and he was moving furniture all across the country. And one day his boss, I think this is the story, I hope I'm not blaspheming his tale, but his boss suggested that they just put all the furniture. They didn't have a fancy showroom or anything. He was like, why don't we just put all the furniture on the parking lot and just see if people come and buy it? And because they could see it and whatever. And everyone kind of looked at him like he was crazy. And he was like, we got to try something, even if it's wrong. Do something, even if it's wrong. Don't be paralyzed by the question. Get after it. Try something. And if it doesn't work, at least you've learned from it. Don't put the furniture back in the parking lot again,
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so I love R&D. I love the medical device industry because it's deeply collaborative. We've touched on the clinician and engineer collaboration. I'm just supply chain and fabricator, working with R&D engineers like yourself, trying to get really generally pretty simple components in their hands quickly. So you have engineers, you have physicians, supply chain, manufacturing, you have regulatory, you haven't even crossed that bridge. That'll have to be another podcast. You've got quality. Where do you see the biggest breakdown between this collaboration?
I would say breakdown typically occurs toward the end of the project, where either the functionality or the performance is not quite there. Mm-hmm. Or simply the product's not scalable. Yeah. So often these cross-functional breakdown surface toward the end of the project. And
it is hard to get all those people in the room or on the call, so you've got to kind of find out which person is going to have the critical information to get it back on track. And it's great when all the stars align, but having the good relationships between all of those different departments and all those different teams is so important, because someone's going to have the key to unlock the problem and figure out a solution there. So I love I love the idea of just collaborating more, and that last 20% seems like it's killing us in R&D. That's where all the breakdowns are happening, the relationships, the DFM conversations. So advice to the engineers: beware of the last 20% of the project, and how much time is dedicated to that for rework and conversations to clarify specifications. That's good. We've mentioned, that some of these teams, like you said before, don't speak the same language. Like the physician uses a little different vocabulary than an R&D engineer. And what tools can we use to bridge those gaps just in the language?
I would say the in-person collaboration can be very effective. So if there is a big gap, I would encourage in-person collaboration where physicians come to the engineering lab and just see how the devices are made and what testing are they doing, just to get a bit of a feel of the medical device itself. And vice versa, I would encourage engineers to go to the field and see the procedure, see the pain point for the physician, see what other things that may not even talked about that could be added to the product. I think in-person collaboration is a key to successful product development.
Yeah, I think it's one of the things that separates us from AI too, right? Like just getting to get in a room together and chat and figure out problems. I think it's great. So what challenges are you looking forward to working through the most at ZenCath? Where are the biggest opportunities for you?
We've seen a lot of innovation and movement in robotic and therapeutic and smart devices in general. Mm-hmm. So I'm excited about all of these, excited to support customers to bring more innovation to life that does better and more for the patients. So heading toward that smart robotic, those tend to provide more clinical outcomes to the patients. So I'm excited to see more of these products come to life and help customers bring innovations to the market to improve life and to just get more of these performance and get more of the the pain point lifted from the field. So it's exciting. Looking forward to see more of that.
Yeah, you've definitely seen it before in your career, and you were kind of locked into one part, and now you're going to see the full scope. So I'm excited to see how you utilize your platform, your organization to help streamline some of these issues, and like you said, solve the pain points and make the process smoother and faster, so we get more innovation to market quicker. Yeah, it's great. It's exciting to think about. I'm excited to follow the journey. It's going to be great. Let's do some rapid fire. I won't ask you like tea or coffee this time. I'm going to ask you, okay, design, prototyping, or testing, which stage do you love the most?
Prototyping is where I see a lot of hard work and idea come to life. So it's an exciting stage for me.
You can see it. Like I can see it in you when you talk about prototyping. Like that is the point of excitement. Okay, biggest lesson from becoming a founder.
Do one thing at a time can help you move faster than doing 10 things halfway.
Yeah, I bet that's hard though, because you have a lot of things going on at the same time. You want to kind of having to just focus on one thing. It's probably kind of tricky.
It is, yeah. It's a hard balance.
Yes. Okay, what's one thing every R&D engineer should know about supply chain?
It has to be sustainable before it goes to commercial product.
Yeah. What do you mean by that?
It has to be, it fits within the supply chain, like cost and also accessibility. Like it's not something that you can get once, but you can get a large quantity. It fits within the cost for that particular component for your product. So when you get to market, you can scale with it and not just you can make 10 devices out of it. Yeah,
nope, that's good. It's really good. One thing founders underestimate most.
I would say their health and well-being in general. It's critical for their success of the business. So they need to take care of their health, get enough sleep as much as possible. Don't underestimate, lack of sleep and not taking care of yourself can impact your business.
It's so true. That's just great general advice all around, for sure. As someone who, oh man, I just never get enough sleep, but it'll come. I'm working on it. All right. What if you could instantly improve one part of medical device development? What would it be?
It would be iteration cycle time.
Yeah. We've talked about that. It's depressing that it could get so long. So I'm glad you're here in the industry to help us figure it out. And what's one thing you wish every medical device engineer understood about the R&D process before they started their first development program?
Understanding how the product is made can help them be a far better designer if they just dive into R&D, design product, and they don't know how it's fabricated. They don't know what tolerance makes sense. They don't know what this tolerance can cost them in a full-scale production component. So I would encourage any new engineers to the field to really dive into how the product is made, to the supply chain, to their supplier, be working with them very closely so they can learn the other aspects around R&D that makes them a better designer.
It's so good. We actually apply that idea at Component Supply. Like, we started off with very manual processes, and to this day we have some, because not everything can be automated or use a special machine for. But before we add any equipment or before we let someone train on the equipment, we make them train on the manual side of it so they can understand what the automation is doing, the machine is doing, because we have found it makes it better, easier for them to problem solve if they know the mechanics of how it actually works. Because sometimes it can be kind of easy to just press some buttons, but then when there's a problem, if you really understand the parts and the mechanics behind it, then you can solve the problem, which will inevitably have problems.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
Yeah. So Hazim, it's been so wonderful to chat with you. We're so excited to see where you take ZenCath and what you're going to be up to. I hope you come back on the podcast someday and give us an update. So thank you so much for coming on.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
We will be including links to ZenCath and encourage you to connect with them on LinkedIn. We'll post links to the website and other connection points in the description of this podcast, so you can learn more and connect. And in the meantime, let's go change the world.